Hello, I'm Sam Cruz, and I am doing a auto body repair project for my passion pursuits. And I feel like this is a worthwhile project because of how real world applicable I can use with this project. I feel like whenever you do something with your hands, whenever you're learning on a skill that you won't just use in high school, it's not just some research thing that I'll learn later. No, I can actually use this whenever I get a car and I can say, hey, well, we have these paint problems here. I want to get money off and I can save money and then I can fix it myself. I can teach it to other people. It's just one of those great hand, uh, one of those working with yourself, do it yourself kind of projects. I think is really important for a guy like myself who I really like to do hands on work. And I think with a project like this, it's not always about having the craziest project. I know it's not the most original project since it's being with a car. Uh, I know that there's many other people who have done the same thing, but I have no background knowledge at all with any of this stuff. And I think if I can show what it's like for me to do the proper research, having no background knowledge, and then learning things like what I would do differently, what kind of problems I face, what I'd do differently next time. So far, I've learned that since I'm doing everything by hand, I went the cheapest route I could. I got hand paint, I got spray on primer, and I am using sandpaper, and that's all I'm using for my project. And I think whenever you put it in perspective that a job with just a car, fixing the car door and a car bumper, just not even fixing the cracks or anything that I've done myself with epoxy, but whenever you are using things like completely putting all those things in and then realizing how much it actually costs, that's $800 job with a bumper and a car. But whenever you only spend $75 on everything from sandpaper, car wash, wax, the actual paint itself, I mean, if you can learn those things and then master that skill, that's something that'd be very important later on. And I think that that real world application, just the knowledge of something like that, is very important. And I think that's something that makes this project worthwhile. I think that this will be something that me myself I'll be able to carry on for many years and I could master that skill. I'm not entirely sure about auto body because I'm more passionate about machining and welding. I love hand-on things, but I have no artsy skills. I'm not the most elegant guy whenever it comes to painting my painting any of my fill-in areas. But I feel like it's really cool because of I've learned so much. The things that I've learned so far are what kind of paint that I'm using, the kind of primer. So far in my project, the paint that I'm using, the acrylic paint, it's not shining like the rest of mine, and I'm trying to figure out, well, what kind of things can I do to make it look a little bit better. So I figured out, well, I gotta shine it as much as I can, wax it with my 2000 grit sandpaper, make sure it's wet, and then I have to wax it and polish it, and it helps a lot more than you think it would. Without me just painting it on and leaving it, it's a pretty big eyesore. But I think that whenever I learn such skills, then it'll be able to help me. If I would have used a spray paint bottle, it would have saved all of my feathering in problems. Whenever I'm using it by hand, I have these really harsh lines, and I can't really seem to fix that because of how the paint kind of is really thick, and that thick paint really doesn't match up with the rest, especially when I use primer as well. Because then once I try and get even on that same even plane with my bumper, it gets to the point where I can't get exactly matched to it because my primer is at the same level as my regular paint. So whenever I am sanding all of that down, I really can't get a perfect matte lined up finish with using primer and using my paint. So that's something I've also learned. And then I've also just learned small things like don't fill up your paint can too much. My little paint can, I've spilt it probably 10 times, and there's no reason for me to be spilling that. And I just think that all these things I'm learning down. I also spilt paint, and I realized, well, how do I get paint out of concrete? I had to Google how how to get paint out of concrete, and I found out that gasoline was one of the best things with acrylic concrete. And small things like all of these things, I think, will be uh, applicable to all my real world situations, all the things I'm going into, and I think it's just a great skill for me to learn past high school.